This story begins in a Spanish prison where many new prisoners were brought in. Among them was Andres, a banker who had to serve an 8-year sentence in this harsh facility. When they arrived, all prisoners were taken to one room, stripped completely and thoroughly searched. A guard named Domingo approached Andres and offered to buy his expensive suit for 250 euros. When Andres refused to sell his suit after Domingo's repeated attempts, the angry guard punished him severely. Domingo denied him a mattress to sleep on and gave him only a bucket of water for 3 days. As days passed, due to the prison's filth and terrible conditions, lice covered Andres' entire body. When he tried to bathe with so little water, it was nearly impossible to wash properly. One day, a prisoner named Blackie came to give Andres food. Seeing Andres' terrible condition, Blackie felt pity and gave him cigarettes, offering friendship and human support. That night, smoking a cigarette, Andres wondered if he would ever escape this terrible prison. Over the next days, his condition worsened significantly, and he went mad, banging on his cell door repeatedly. When the warden Marino heard about Andres' suffering and mental breakdown, he ordered the guards to treat him better. After 3 weeks of isolation, Andres was moved to the main prison where other prisoners lived. In the main prison, only Blackie greeted him warmly. Andres learned he'd share a room with Blackie and another prisoner named Pino, who was famous for having many books and fancy clothes to rent out. The next day, prisoners' families came to visit. Andres was sure his girlfriend would come, but instead his girlfriend's sister Lucia arrived, telling him his girlfriend no longer wanted to see him. Lucia said his girlfriend considered him a criminal and wanted nothing to do with him anymore. Andres felt deeply heartbroken by this devastating news and returned to his cell in complete sadness. The next morning in the prison yard, some prisoners attacked Andres and stole all his clothes. He went to guard Domingo and complained about the attack, but Domingo refused to file a complaint. Domingo told him that filing a complaint costs 300 euros in this prison. Angry but helpless, Andres had no choice but to accept this injustice and leave silently without any assistance. Then he met another prisoner named Manuel, who gave him clothes and took him to Boni, a prisoner who was a doctor. Boni examined Andres and offered him to join his party called PRA, which fights for prisoners' rights. Although Andres refused to join because he feared it would increase his problems, he began to understand the importance of the movement. One day, Andres saw all the prisoners chanting loudly to reduce their sentences. Blackie and Pino joked that this dream would never come true because the government would never listen. That evening, when Andres was in the prison yard, Boni came and checked his teeth. Under this excuse, Boni gave Andres some papers and told him to write revolutionary slogans on them using his left hand. This was so no one would recognize his handwriting and identify him as the author. Finally, Andres agreed to help with this task. That night, he wrote many revolutionary slogans on the papers to be distributed throughout the prison to gather prisoners for protest. During this time, Blackie told Andres his entire story. Blackie said he missed his family very much and dreamed of escaping this prison one day to live a happy life with them. The next morning, guards took Blackie out of his cell. They took him to the warden's office for interrogation because guards had found evidence that a tunnel had been dug in the kitchen. A while later, the warden told Blackie's cellmates that Blackie died of a heart attack during interrogation. But Andres and Pino knew the jail staff had deliberately killed Blackie because they suspected he was planning an escape. Seeing all this, Andres went mad with anger and despair for his lost friend. He scattered all the papers he had made throughout the entire prison in protest. When guards saw this, they beat Andres very badly and locked him in solitary confinement. Days passed like this, and after a week, Andres was taken out because Lucia came to visit him. Lucia actually liked Andres, so she came to see him every day despite what his girlfriend said. She gave him a newspaper clipping about prisoners' rights, showing that the country's atmosphere was changing. The next morning, many Spanish people came outside the prison and began protesting loudly. They threw a chicken into the prison yard with a letter about reducing prisoners' sentences. Guards chased the chicken, and all prisoners laughed at the spectacle and entertainment. Pino, who had always thought their protest was useless, changed his mind after seeing the people's support. Finally, Pino decided to join the movement officially. As soon as he joined, Pino went to a prisoner named Campo in his block and removed him and all the warden's spies. Days passed, and soon it was 1977 when elections were happening in all of Spain. Different political parties were participating in these elections and competing for power. After knowing this, Pino, Boni, and Andres went to meet a special prisoner named Marbella. Pino offered him to join the movement and fight for prisoners' rights. Marbella refused at first because his life in prison was comfortable and he had everything he needed. But Pino showed him a ring and reminded him how prison guards had brutally killed his own son. Seeing this ring, Marbella felt sad and finally decided to join their movement to avenge his son's death. He shook hands with Pino and they left together as comrades in the fight. On the other hand, guards destroyed Pino's room and set all his books on fire in retaliation. The next morning, when prisoners were given breakfast, one prisoner started shouting loudly in his cell. When a guard went to see him, the prisoner took the guard's gun and held him prisoner. Pino, Boni, and Andres gathered all the prisoners, and together they destroyed the entire prison. Soon all these prisoners went to the roof and began shouting revolutionary slogans loudly. Guards attacked them with rubber bullets, but despite this, the prisoners continued their movement and protests. Many people outside the prison fully supported them and applied enormous pressure on the authorities. Seeing this, the prison warden agreed to listen to the prisoners' demands and negotiate with them. Boni and Andres went to talk to the officer as representatives of the prisoners. After a long meeting, these officers accepted all the prisoners' conditions and asked them to stop the movement. Boni and Andres agreed to this and convinced the prisoners to stop the protest. But then one prisoner noticed something strange about the man who had just approved their conditions. This prisoner recognized him as a warden from another prison, not a judge or official as he claimed. Boni and Andres realized the warden had deceived them to stop the movement. Before they could do anything, guards attacked them and beat them very badly. They were locked in their cells and the guards threw them into solitary confinement again. That evening, the warden called Boni and Andres to his office and made them an offer. According to the document, they would be transferred to another prison and freed after 2 years. But if they didn't sign, their sentences would be increased by 10 years for property damage and rioting. Although this offer was good, Andres rejected it because he couldn't betray his comrades and the movement. When Andres woke up the next morning, he saw Boni being transferred to another prison. This meant that Boni had accepted the warden's offer to save himself from further punishment. That night, when Pino and Andres were sleeping in their cells, guards came and put them in a car. They were taken out of prison and brought to a prison in Barcelona, one of the most dangerous prisons in the country. When they arrived, Pino and Andres were given injections and then beaten very badly. For several days, the guards tortured them to make them stop the movement, but they refused to surrender. Due to this torture, their health deteriorated significantly, and they were admitted to the prison hospital. Andres told the doctor about the torture happening in this prison and requested to be sent back. Seeing their condition, the doctor felt pity for them and made a report transferring them back. When Pino and Andres returned to their old prison, their comrades welcomed them like heroes. They continued their movement and raised their voices against prison authorities. Their plan was to gain public attention so they could pressure the government to accept their demands. A few days later, a politician visited the prison on an official tour. Andres told him everything about how the guards and warden tortured all prisoners in this facility. After this meeting, the news spread across the entire country. Every Spanish citizen began talking about prisoners' rights and demanding reforms from the government. One day in the prison yard, Andres saw a prisoner named Ruby talking to a guard. That night, Andres went to Marbella's room and was talking about the movement with him. But suddenly, Ruby and another prisoner entered the room and attacked Marbella with a knife. Marbella died from his wounds in this brutal attack right in front of Andres. The guards had offered Ruby that if he killed Marbella, he could take all of Marbella's belongings. But Ruby didn't harm Andres, which showed there was something more to this arrangement. Days passed like this, and soon came the time for elections in the country. A new government came to power after the elections and won the vote. But this new government refused to accept the prisoners' demands and rejected all their conditions. Hearing this news, Pino and Andres and all the prisoners lost all their hope completely. They stopped their movement because they realized the government would never listen. Andres thought his entire life would be spent in this prison and he would never be free. Seeing Andres' sadness, Pino told him about another escape plan. Pino took him to the basement through an old lift and told him about digging a tunnel. Pino said if they dug a tunnel in the basement, they could escape through the drain outside. But they only had 3 weeks to do this before renovation work would start. Andres worried that guards might hear the digging sounds and catch them. Pino told him he'd ask other prisoners to play football outside so guards wouldn't hear the noise. They started digging and worked hard every day on the tunnel. But one day, Ruby and his associate somehow came to the basement and saw them digging. They had no choice but to include Ruby and his associate in their escape plan. The next day, Andres' lawyer came to see him and talked about reopening his case. But Andres firmly refused because he had lost faith in the government and the legal system. After many days of digging, they created a tunnel that would help them escape the prison. Finally, the day came when they were about to escape. Pino gave Andres new clothes so no one would suspect him outside, and he could blend with common people. They all entered the tunnel and slowly crawled out of the prison to freedom. Pino and Andres reached a nearby bus stop and quickly got on a bus. But unfortunately, Ruby and his associate were caught by police and put back in prison. After several hours of travel, Pino and Andres reached another city and said goodbye to each other. They parted ways and each went his own direction with new hopes and dreams. Andres put his hand in his pocket where Pino had left him lots of money and a new ID. Pino had done this so Andres could reach a safe place and start a new life. Andres was very happy and silently thanked Pino for his help and friendship. He then went to Lucia, his girlfriend's sister, and started a new life with her. They built a future together away from the prison and its terrible memories.